Joe Biden has signed a law virtually banning all imports from the Chinese region of Xinjiang.
The US is cutting off China's Xinjiang from the global supply chain. However, all the sanctions can be traced back to one anti-Muslim figure. Who has started caring about Muslims in Xinjiang?
And the United States has imposed more restrictions to import from 3 Chinese companies.
News of US sanctions against Xinjiang-related companies have been widespread.
In the face of the most recent sanctions, China responded by placing their own sanctions on 2 individuals.
Edmund Shi and Nicole Mogret, as well as a US intelligence consultancy firm, Kharon.
Who is Xu and Mogret? Are they masterminds behind the sanctions?
Are they just cogs in a much more sinister machine?
Our investigation was blown wide open when we started looking into Kharon.
Kharon provided a list of Chinese companies for US sanctions. The intelligence consultancy firm was founded in 2018. Big financial firms and corporations, or the US government, use Kharon to aim global sanctions at various countries, as well as supposedly mitigate risk.
It all sounds very noble, but in reality, is it a PR front for a US-led smear campaign? Kharon has its origins in the US Treasury. In their 2018 PR publication, Kharon boasted its connection with US Department of the Treasury.
In other words, Kharon is essentially a privatized department of the US government.
And we also found this: Kharon CEO Matthew Epstein. He served at the US Treasury Department from 2003 to 2010. We dug into Epstein's background, and what we found is explosive. In short, Epstein is a man who presents himself as a protector of Uyghur Muslims, while at the same time having a shameful past of involvement in anti-Muslim witch hunts.
Before Epstein founded Kharon, he founded the Campstall Group in 2012. It was an American consultancy firm with a similar remit to what Kharon does now. In 2014, renowned journalist Glenn Greenwald investigated Epstein.
Cables leaked by Chelsea Manning and published by WikiLeaks exposed Epstein's interfering hand in the Middle East. Epstein manipulated neocon journalists to plant anti-Qatar stories in American publications to destabilize Qatar.
Epstein was also the assistant director of the Investigative Project on Terrorism, IPT. IPT has been called a prominent part of the Islamophobia network within the United States and a leading source of anti-Muslim racism, noted for its record of selective reporting and poor scholarship. Interestingly, Greenwald noted Epstein's public CV omitted his work for IPT.
So we have 2 distinct timestamps in Epstein's career where he established entities presenting themselves as research institutions, but in reality were fronts to target political and economic adversaries of the US.
Whether it's anti-Muslim or anti-China witch hunts, today the purpose of Kharon is to give the US's foreign interference an air of independence and respectability, but it's the same old playbook and the same old player. In the case of Xinjiang, here is an explanation of how that playbook works, which can be described as a pyramid scheme. Step 1. Get Western think tanks and watchdogs to misrepresent one of China's most far-reaching and ambitious projects, poverty alleviation.
By the way, China's poverty reduction efforts have influenced all areas of society, so finding that connection is very easy. It's also very easy to misrepresent China's poverty alleviation projects to a non-Chinese audience, subject to decades of anti-China conditioning.
Step 2. Find businesses in Xinjiang that have ties in the West, be it cotton, electronics, or food products. It doesn't matter, as long as you can say Uyghurs work for them. Step 3. Use lack of evidence of no forced labor, the incredibly difficult task of proving a negative, as proof of a cover-up, as well as to tick the criteria in the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Step 4. Enforce sanctions and put an end to business relationships with Xinjiang companies, destroy jobs for the poor, create income inequality, and destabilize whole communities, all in the noble-sounding names of truth, freedom, human rights, and Western values. It's the standard US foreign interference playbook. These steps have been recycled again and again.
The Uyghur legislation in Washington, I mean, that's not new. way back when, the 1960s, 70s, 80s, the United States came out, Cuban Freedom Act, the names even used to refer to these pieces of legislation are propaganda tools. The United States doesn't care at all about the Uyghurs. They're just using the Uyghurs as an excuse to interfere in the internal affairs of China. The fact that the United States does it and gets away with it doesn't mean that it is legal. It just means that we do not have in the United Nations effective enforcement mechanisms that could be used to prohibit the United States from doing this.
Whether it's US wars or US sanctions, it is ordinary people who suffer.
And in the case of Xinjiang, it is the Uyghurs' rights to work under the international human rights law that the US is violating again and again with every sanction.
Is there one man at the top? It wouldn't be fair to place the blame entirely on Epstein when it's clear that there's such a concerted effort by the US government, decades in the making.
But until the public learn about this den of iniquity, the West's anti-Muslim smear campaign goes on, whether it is falsely painting Muslims as perpetrators or falsely painting Muslims as victims.